First of all, I love your sweatshirt. Baseball math, I love that. That's great. I love that. I will also say, I told Lee I was going to say this, and she said, don't say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I, I feel sorry for you guys, okay? The ladies get to hear more than one speaker. You all were stuck with me all weekend. So if you didn't like the first lesson, you're going, this is going to be a long couple of days. But I really appreciate you sticking with us and look forward to tomorrow and Sunday as well. I know what happens a lot of times when there's classes on marriage, on parenting, and especially sort of when it gets split like this, or there's an emphasis where it's mainly a split class. Maybe it's a sermon on Mother's Day and Father's Day, for example. What often happens is Mother's Day is spent, telling moms how wonderful they are and how, the world couldn't be the same without them, and make sure you love your mother and all that kind of stuff. And it turns to Father's Day. It's you guys are a bunch of deadbeats, and the world's falling apart because of you. All right. I don't want to do that this weekend. Yeah, we're going to talk about some serious stuff, but I feel we do that too much. And I feel we do that too much in part because the world already beats us down enough. As basically everything that we are, Christians, Christian fathers, Christian husbands, and then to be told basically you're horrible because you're trying to do what God tells you to do. That's basically the world's messaging if you stop and think about it. We're gonna be serious about some things in these settings tonight and then tomorrow also, and we're gonna say some serious things. But I hope none of it comes across as, oh, they got this guy to come in to beat us up. That's not it. I'm hoping to put some wind in some sails. Maybe at times, as I said, to say some serious things, but hopefully in a way that encourages us to do better, or in some cases maybe to keep doing what we're doing. I think sometimes I know when I preach on parenting in general or being fathers or whatever, sometimes part of that is some of you guys are doing this right. And stick with it. You just need somebody to say, keep going, and I hope that's the case for each one of us. But if it's not, and you see some things we talk about, and we do better, don't take it as, oh, he's just beating me up. No, take it as encouragement. Just do better. God loves godly men, and that needs to be said right from the outset. If you are striving to be a godly man, godly husband, godly father, godly grandfather, God loves you. And God is grateful for the effort that you put in, especially in the headwinds of the culture in which we find ourselves. I think there's a special appreciation for that from Scripture. The ladies right now, you may have noticed on the schedule, this is the one time where the titles are somewhat similar. The ladies are talking about how nurturing leads to peace. We're talking about how providing leads to peace. And every time Lee and I have done this, we kind of talk about how it's kind of ironic because the Bible talks about men nurturing. You might think Ephesians chapter 6, fathers not provoke your children in wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And so you may think, let's kind of role reversal class or whatever, but hopefully we know the Bible also places a premium on us being providers for our home, and how that brings about, the reason we talk about peace is it brings about God's peace. It's not meant to say if we do these things, everything's going to be perfect, that your kids are going to come home every day just smiling, oh, I'm so glad to be here. It's not that. But there's a godly peace that the world just doesn't grasp that we can have if we will do these kind of things. So what I want to talk about, and this is meant to be kind of laid back, are just some different areas where we are to take the lead in providing certain things for our home. And if we provide these things as best we can, that it will lead to that godly peace in our home. The first one, and when I've done this lesson a handful of times, and I always struggle with putting it first or last, and I always put it first, is to provide spiritual provision or spiritual leadership. Sometimes I think I should put it last to kind of build towards it, but I can't keep it out of the pole position. Make sure that really is first, that it is up to us. Again, you go back to Ephesians chapter 6, it's fathers who are to bring up children to nurture and admonition of the Lord. It's the scriptural mandate for us to be the head of the household. While that's a very negative term in our culture, it's also very biblical. And considering our culture is basically against the Bible, it makes sense that goes against what the Bible says. But we are to be the spiritual leaders in our homes. And we know that. I don't think you would be here on a Friday night, on a pretty Friday night, if you didn't really believe that. But here's what I want to do for a couple minutes under this point, is think of some ways to make sure that we're doing that. Just give some practical things. Again, none of this is meant to beat anybody up. It's just to give some practical things to make sure that we are doing the best we can. This is not meant to be a full list. There's no way we could give a full list, for the simple reason that every home is different. Spiritual leadership is going to look the same in some ways, and in some homes, frankly, it's going to look very different because of certain situations, because of problems with children or in-laws or all sorts of things. But there's some general things that should be true in all of our homes. And the first one is, I cannot lead my family spiritually if I'm not spiritual first. I cannot lead where I'm not willing to go. Our families, our wives, and I would say especially our children, will see it if we're trying to be hypocritical. If we're trying to just tell them how to be spiritual and they don't see it in us. They don't see us striving to do the best we can do. It again, not that we're perfect. None of us is perfect. But if they don't see the effort in us making sure that godly things come first, that's going to be seen. If I'm not walking with the Lord in full assurance of faith, I need to get that right before I start telling my wife how to improve her spiritual life, or my children how to walk closer to God. Now, that doesn't mean I don't care while I'm trying to improve those things. But my first priority needs to be to make sure I'm right with God. I read a book. It was actually by a leadership guy a number of years ago. And it wasn't really Christian at all, except he wrote from a Christian perspective and basically took the simple route of, hey, it's good to be a spiritual guy, and that's about it. There wasn't a whole lot of Bible in it or anything else. But one of the interesting things about that book that I found was he talked about how his number one relationship, he said, of course, was his relationship with God, and he defined that in terms that I wouldn't agree with, but I kind of, okay, that's great. But then he talked about how if he was going to be a great leader, and he ran a multi-million-dollar business, he was a father of, I think, 4 or 5 kids, he's married, all this stuff. He said, the number 2 relationship I have to get right is me. And when I saw that chapter heading, I was like, I think I'm reading the wrong book. But then when he explained it, he was exactly right. That he could not lead his wife, he couldn't lead his kids, he couldn't lead his company, he couldn't lead anything if he wasn't, quote unquote, leading himself in the right way. And he took that from a spiritual standpoint. Again, I didn't agree with everything he said, but it made me think about, in everything that I do, a husband, a father, a preacher, a counselor, whatever it is, am I just telling people what to do? Or do they see it in me first and have a desire to not follow me because I'm something great, but I know I'm safe if I'm striving to do what Adam says to do or what Adam is doing? That passage in 1 Corinthians where Paul says, imitate me, how? Do you remember it? As I imitate Christ. He doesn't just say, follow me. He basically is saying, where you see me being like Jesus, get right in step. But by implication, he's also saying, if you don't see me walking like Jesus, take a different road, right? That needs to be true in our home. If we're going to lead spiritual, we have to be spiritual ourselves first. Number 2, we must be the ones who stand up for what's right and stand against what's wrong in our home. Again, not to beat anybody up, but far too often from what I see, this falls on wives and moms more than husbands and dads. That's just observational, anecdotal. There's no numbers to back it up. But for people who come to my office, marital problems or problems with kids, sometimes, sadly, in my own home it's been true, but just visiting people in their homes, sometimes, something happens and you're going, why didn't the dad step up and say something? Why didn't the husband step up and do something, right? We need to be the ones who say God's word is going to direct our home. And that's not dictatorial. That's not tyrannical. It's nothing like that. But we need to set the tone for the ones who say this is what is right, and that's what's going to happen, and this is what is wrong, and it's not, as best as I can control that, it's not going to happen. That means that we have to live that way, and it means that people need to see it in us. We don't lie about anything. The old joke, you can't really tell as much anymore because everybody has a cell phone. But a lot of us used to tell the joke about how, somebody would call your house. Remember the phones that had like the cord to grab the wall and stuff, those things? Right? Some of us still have those, but not many. And your kid would answer it, and so you would go stand outside the door and say, "Tell them I'm not home." Or you'd leave all your clothes on and go stand in the shower and say, "Tell them I'm taking a shower." It's a silly old example, but kids see through that in a heartbeat. That we can lie when we need to. We can lie when it gets us what we want. We can't lie. We don't need people who are ever cruel or harsh, but also in a positive way. We build each other up. The Bible teaches us to be encouragers. That should be true in our homes. They should see that in us, that we're sincere in these things, but when we see our wife do something well, we truly build her up and encourage her. We see our children do something well. We truly build them up. We attend worship together. We don't dress immodestly. We do these things, but we're the ones who take Scripture and make sure it's applied in our homes. 3, we need to lead our family in the Bible. I'm just going to mention that one because there's a specific lesson tomorrow where we're going to walk through some things about what we typically call family Bible time in our home. We may call it family devotionals or whatever. And so I'm just going to mention it here and expand on it tomorrow. And if you have kids of any age still in the home, I hope you'll be here for that lesson. That's my favorite one to do because it's really fun because it takes the pressure off of dads to think that you have to go, "All right, children, tonight we're going to understand Ezekiel." And it's not that. Okay, we get a lot of fun suggestions. 4, we're not afraid to lead our families in prayer. And by that I mean anywhere about anything. I'm not saying this is a sin or awful or anything else, but if we pray at home for a meal, we should pray at a restaurant for a meal. I believe that. And I know it's difficult, and sometimes it can be a little embarrassing. You're trying to pray, and there's a beer commercial on behind you on the TV. That's a little awkward. It's kind of like, okay, so we're praying as Budweiser's telling us what to drink next. Okay, I get all that, but our kids need to see that prayer means that much to us, and our families need to see that we're willing to pray about anything. Some of you who still have very small children, man, if you possibly can, as often as you can, either when they wake up in the morning or before they go to bed at night, take a moment and pray with them. You'll never regret it. Yeah, you're tired at the end of the day. I was too. And I didn't do it every night. I wish I had. Sometimes you're not home. We all get that. But if you have that opportunity, what a moment. And it may be something really, really brief, but it's special to that kid, and I'm telling you, you're going to learn things about your kid if you'll spend those few moments in prayer. Be willing to pray about things you might think are silly, but they're not silly to those kids. They're very important to those kids. Be willing to pray about very important things in front of your children. Sometimes we think that as a husband and wife, we'll pray about the serious stuff, and then maybe when we get around the kids, we'll just pray about the soup. It's not saying we don't use the exact same language, but our kids need to know that we're praying about, Granny who has cancer. We're praying about that. We may use a little bit different language if the kids, especially if they're really little, if they're in the room, but we're going to pray those serious things. They need to see that. So we're the spiritual leaders. We know that. But I wanted to give you encouragement to keep doing it. It's not easy. And it's especially not easy to do it every single day. It gets tiresome and burdensome in the world in which we live. But what a joy if we'll do that. Number 2, we provide financial security. That doesn't mean we're wealthy necessarily. And we could go into all the conversations you've probably had before about, yes, we are wealthy compared to this nation in the world or this indigenous group in the world. I get all that. But you know what I mean when I say it doesn't mean we're wealthy. In American American way of looking at things or the Western way of looking at things. But the financial provision is a biblical principle. I know that the verse that Paul wrote, if a man will not work, neither should he eat, I know that's in the context, I should say, of dealing with widows. I get that, dealing with widows in the family. But the principle's found all over Scripture, right? If you've never thought about the fact, it's worth putting in all of our minds again that when God put Adam and Eve in the garden and told them to work or to tend the garden, that was before they sinned. In other words, this work was a good thing for them. Work was a positive before the fall. It was after the fall that work became the thing where you get hurt working and all that kind of stuff. And it always makes me mad that his name was Adam. Because everybody, the sin of Adam. It wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. Sorry when you're, weeding your garden and get, thorns in your hand. It's not my fault. It's that guy's fault. But the work itself is a good thing. Work is a dignified thing. And the financial side that comes from that, in our culture, money, cash, bank accounts, whatever. Other cultures, it might be produce of the land or whatever. That's a dignified thing. And the Bible makes it clear that the leading priority of that is on the husband, is on the father. But it's not just how much we bring home. When I talk about financial security, I'm talking about making sure that we have a biblical perspective on it. If we have children, it means we teach them, the value of a dollar, but we also teach them where those things come from. Daddy's able to go to work because God gave him the physical ability, the mental ability, the connections. If mommy works outside the home, God gave her the ability, the mental ability, the physical ability to do what she does, and it's a dignified thing. And so whatever we have is a blessing from him, and we teach them that. We teach also contentment. We may not take a vacation every year to some far-flung place in the world. It's okay. We may not live in the nicest neighborhood. Our family, frankly, we're very blessed. We live in a very nice neighborhood in Paducah, but I can tell you, there's some that are a whole lot nicer than ours. We live in but then I look at some things, some people look at our neighborhood and go, whoa, you live here? And we look at other neighborhoods and go, whoa, you live here? And I bet you people in those neighborhoods go to someone else's and go, whoa. And you know what? Kids in all those neighborhoods, some are happy and some are as discontented as can possibly be because of the attitude of the parents. Are we content with what we have? And frankly, sometimes what we don't have. We may not have the nicest cars or fancy vacations or whatever. We provide those things for our family that we can. And if you're providing a spiritual foundation and you're providing the needs of your family, you are not a failure. Our world wants to tell us you're a failure if you can't take them, on 6 vacations a year and make sure every kid has a brand new car before they turn 16. All right? You're not a failure if you're providing what you can with dignified work and teaching contentment and teaching good things. You've probably heard it said before that one of the things you can do to help your marriage, help your wife feel more secure financially, will only cost you $1,000. Have you ever heard this before? That's true. Actually, it actually didn't cost you $1,000. It's literally putting $1,000 in the bank for an emergency. Most women, when surveyed, will tell you that if we had $1,000 in the bank and we said that's only for true emergencies, the water heater blows up, the transmission goes out, not we need a new couch, but the true emergencies, most women will tell you that they would feel more secure financially than they feel right now, $1,000. Now, for some of us, that's a huge amount of money. For others, it's like, I'll do that before I get home, and I'll transfer that money into an account and make my wife feel better, okay? But we're talking about stuff that doesn't have to cost millions of dollars, but just provides a level of security because you're saying bad things are going to happen. We're ready for them, or at least some of them, and we're okay. Guys, it's fine for us to have a hobby that maybe costs us some money, but make sure if you're going to make a major purchase that you and your wife are in agreement on it. I have known the guy who surprised his wife, quote unquote, surprised his wife with about a $17,000 bass boat, and she doesn't fish. That wasn't a happy day for that marriage, right? Did you know, by the way, the jokes are always that the women are the spenders in the family. Did you know that on average men spend far more than women? It's not close. It's not close. And I'm talking about discretionary spending. I'm not talking about the groceries and the bills. I'm talking about just extra money. And the reason is really simple. We can make fun of our wives because she buys, 6 dresses every year that cost $150 or whatever, but she doesn't make fun of us when we buy a $9,000 used car. Now, which one of those cost more? Right? The $9,000 used car that we bought just to drive around town. Hers cost $700 something because she spent more times. It seems like she spent more money. If we're going to make major purchases, we got to agree on. We got to agree on. It's okay to have some cool things, some expensive things, but not if it takes away from the financial security of we need some money in case little Johnny gets sick, and little Johnny's going to get sick. Or our hot water heater's 37 years old. We probably need to think about, having some money set aside to make sure that's taken care of. Number 3, physical security. And I'm not talking about Second Amendment rights. That's for Tuesday to figure out, I guess, or whatever. But it is a biblical principle in creation that men care for women, physically protect. That is very out of culture anymore. Everybody's equal and all that kind of stuff. Yes, there's an equality of value before God. But God clearly made us to be the ones who are physically able to protect our wives. And families need to feel as if they are safe when dad is around. That doesn't mean you have to be a big, imposing figure. Thank goodness. I mean, I'm the weakest guy in here. Okay, I know that. That's all there is to it. I've always been the scrawny kid. Okay, that's the way it always was. But there needs to be an understanding that if you try to hurt my wife or hurt my kids, whatever I've got is coming after you. Whatever I've got, physically, barrier-wise, whatever I can possibly do. Yes, I would die for her. And my kids, frankly. But the question becomes, will I live for them? See, it's easy to say I'd take a bullet for them, because the odds of that happening, frankly, are really low. It might happen, but the odds are really, really low. But I'm willing to do some things physically to protect them by being present with them. This is the part where it's going to sound like I'm bullying you guys or beating down you guys. I don't mean it that way, but it's just sad it needs to be said in our culture, but it does. In a lot of families, the least safe people feel is when dad is home because of dad. They're afraid they're going to be hurt. That should never be the case in a Christian home. It should never be where our wives, our children fear because we're around and we just got mad or we just got upset or whatever it is. Like I said, hopefully that's not a problem in this room, but it may be. If it is, I'd love to talk with you, just to encourage you in some things that can maybe help you when those difficulties come. But that should never, ever, ever be the case. But the security also comes from making sure that we're not allowing sinful influences into our home. Do our children know that we are going to have a regular home? You know what a lot of children really desire is not so much money and stuff and trips. Those things are great. I'm not saying don't do that. You can afford to do that, man. Knock yourself out. That's great. Where kids feel the most secure in a home is if mom and dad are there and obviously love each other. That's it. That's it. And by obviously love each other, I don't mean you're all over each other all the time, but there's just no question that daddy loves mommy. And yeah, dad's going to go to work, and maybe mom works outside the home too, whatever your situation is. But somewhere around 6:30, 7 o'clock this evening, let's say you got 3 kids, all 5 of us are going to be in this house, and life's going to be normal. And there's not going to be yelling and screaming, and dad's upset because his boss was a jerk today, and dad had a hard day, but we had supper together, and life's all right. And look at that. Daddy helped mommy clean the dishes tonight. He loves mommy. Your kids are going to feel most safe when that's the case, and most secure when that's the case. It's almost like God designed it that way. That's the way He made it. So make certain that there is a security. If you can afford physical security, a lot of people talk about gun rights or alarm systems. Well, that's part of it, but some people can't afford that kind of stuff. But there is a security in your presence. You've done this before, I'm sure. I remember very well, we lived in Nashville for 7 years, or a suburb of Nashville. I preached in the city of Nashville. And I still remember one night, we took the kids to a play downtown. Wonderful night. But of course, stuff like that, ball games, plays, that kind of stuff, they get up pretty late at night, and you're in downtown Nashville. It's like, which is a beautiful, I love Nashville, I still love going. But it's, 10:30 at night. At that time, our kids were probably, 10 and 8, we'll say, something like that. And I still remember that we left the play and we had parked I'll say 12 blocks from the TPAC, the Tennessee Performing Arts Center. And after about 2 blocks, I noticed there was a guy following us. I didn't think a whole lot about it because, there's a lot of people in downtown Nashville, even in, 10:30 on a Tuesday night, and a lot of people are letting out of this play, etc. But once we got to about 4 blocks, and all of that crowd had basically fanned out to different parking garages, and there were only a handful of us walking that far. By the way, we had parked that far to go to a restaurant close by, and he was still behind us. Obviously, I'm not the I'm not the physically imposing person. But something inside of me said, you get between your family and that guy. Did he look suspicious? Not really. He just looked like a regular guy. But something just didn't smell right. It just didn't feel right. Now, thankfully, we got to an elevator that went down a parking garage, and he went to another elevator in the same parking garage. It was no threat whatsoever. But I'll never forget that feeling of, what if? This is the moment. Am I really willing to say, if anybody goes, it's me? And that's a weird, if you've ever felt that before, it's a weird feeling to where your mind is going, I'm maybe about to wake up in heaven. Is my family going to be all right? That's what we have to do. Nothing's coming between my family's physical safety and anything else. Number 4, and finally, we have to provide emotional support. Okay, I'm going to show my age. Does anyone remember the TV show Home Improvement, Tool Time, Tim Taylor, that show? Okay, that's not the cleanest show of all time. There's a few great episodes in there. I like a lot of the humor in it. It has one of my favorite lines in the history of television, though. There's one scene where Tim Taylor is talking to his next door neighbor, Wilson, the guy that's always behind the fence, if you remember the show, right? And he's saying something about how that he's trying to show his emotions, and Wilson, the neighbor, gives his wisdom and says something about men have emotions. And the best line, I think, in the history of television is Tim Taylor going, "Oh, I hate all emotions." Because I know that feeling, right? It's like, I'm a guy, right? I'm not supposed to show anything, right? But we have to have emotions. But here's why I say this is a provision. We have to be willing to communicate about emotions. Ooh, that's 2 words guys don't like very much. Communication and emotions, right? But it's a 2-way street. Lee and I celebrated 25 years of marriage in June. Okay, some of you are going, you're just kids. Some of you are going, that's cool, all right? We've been married 25 years, and I don't know why this is true. It is still difficult for me sometimes to tell her how I feel about something. Not the fact, I'll tell facts all day long. But sometimes it's really hard for me to say words like, that made me mad, or I'm really upset about this, or that made me sad. There's something about, letting that side go that's still difficult. Maybe a flaw in me, it may just be a guy thing, I don't know, but it's hard. But what's even more amazing is when I am willing to do that, how much better it makes her feel. Not me. It makes her feel better because she's heard my heart. She hasn't just heard the cold facts. Here's what happened at 8 o'clock. Here's the 8:15 response I gave, and it sounds like I'm reading an email to her. But when I say, that really bothered me, and I'm really struggling with this, she's going to hurt for me, but it makes her feel better. Because she knows that's the full truth. Everything I've said is a truth, but now I put the full truth, the emotion too. But it also means I have to be willing to listen to her and to my kids. I have to be willing to listen not just about the facts, but about the feelings. My wife will tell you, she talks a lot. Some of you guys are thinking you do too. I'm the one up here, okay? When I'm not up here, I don't talk as much. I'm an introvert for the most part. I forced the conversation we had. I enjoyed it. I'm tired now, frankly. That's just me, okay? She likes to talk. She loves to talk. I'm willing to listen to everything she says, including the 927 emotions she felt about this one little thing that happened on a Tuesday that I was going, I didn't know this happened, okay? But if she felt all those things, I need to be willing to accept those feelings and listen to them as a way of her expressing a range of emotions. And the same is true of our children. our children are going to feel some very weird things to us sometimes. We're going to wonder, how in the world did you feel that way about that? Why did that bother you so much? But do you remember what you felt when you were 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 years old? It wasn't always normal, was it? It wasn't always the quote-unquote right way to react to something. Now, it was, because you're just being human. But you look at it as a 40 or 50-year-old and you're going, that's not how adults act. Exactly, they're 12 or 8, okay? And you'd be willing to listen to that, oh, little Sally said this, and it just hurt me so bad. And you're going, she made fun of your doll. Who cares? It's like, your daughter does. Or your son might have a doll. But, your son really is upset that, he struck out once, but, he got 6 hits, but the time he struck out really bothered him. If I'd ever gotten 6 hits in a game, we're going to have ice cream for a week. That's all there is to it, right? But it really, really bothered him that guy struck him out. Because I just can't, and there's just something about that. And we need to be willing to listen to those things. Because we begin to see the underlying personality, the underlying principles, specifically when it comes to our marriages. Let me say a couple things here about the husband and wife, not the children. One of the ways we provide emotional support is by biblically validating her feelings. Notice how I said that. Your wife sometimes may not feel an appropriate way towards something. By the way, the same thing's true about you and about me. But if she's feeling a way that's perfectly biblical, even if you think it's very odd or very weird or whatever, you need to do your best to say, God wired you that way. I may not understand why you're feeling that way about this, but okay, how can we work on this? I don't understand why that upsets you so much, but I'm going to try to help however I can. Let me also say this about husbands and wives specifically. Emotions also obviously play a very strong part in the sexual side of the relationship. We need to make sure that we validate her feelings, not just, pardon the language here, not just the actions of sexuality, but the feelings of it. We make sure we seek to understand why there are times where she really does not feel like being involved sexually. We may not understand at all why that's the case, but it's going to be the case. And we just seek to understand that sort of thing. I know 1 Corinthians 7 talks about how the husband's wife isn't his own, it's the wife's body isn't her own, it's her husband's. But we understand both sides of that. There are times where she's not going to emotionally feel like it. Okay. And we'll talk through those things. But instead of just demanding, well, you're my wife, yeah, and you're my husband. And we're trying to work on this together. The sexual side of marriage plays a huge part in the emotional, I said that backwards. The emotional side of marriage plays a huge part in the sexual side of marriage as well. So I know we haven't looked at a lot of Bible verses, but I hope you've seen some Bible principles tonight. And I probably haven't said anything you didn't know. Okay? You're probably going, I knew all this stuff. Why am I here tonight? To put wind in your sails. If you've listened for the last, whatever it's been, 30 minutes or whatever, and gone, I didn't learn anything, good. Good. Because it means you're doing some stuff right. Keep going. If you did hear something and go, you know what? I've got some stuff to work on. Good. Go work on it. But work on it with her or with your kids. Don't just say, I am a man, I shall self-improve. No, you're in a marriage. We are going to improve. Or I'm a father. I'm going to do better for my kids. And if my kids have something to say to me that I haven't been doing right, I'm going to listen to them. I've had times before where my kids have told me some things, and man, it'll hit you like a ton of bricks because you think you're doing a great job. Because after all, someone asked me to come speak here about marriage and parenting and stuff. And your kids say something, and you go, man, I stink as a father. Right? But if you really listen to that stuff, your kids want you to be a great dad. Your wife wants you to be a great husband. Often, sometimes those things are said not out of anger, but out of frustration because they know how wonderful you can be. And that's what they want. And biblically speaking, that's what they deserve. And above any of that, it's what God deserves because He put you here to be that husband, to be that father, to be that grandfather. And so let's make sure that we provide all these things for our homes as best we possibly can. Anybody got anything you'd like just to say? I have no idea how long I'm supposed to go or how long Leah's going to go. So we may be here an hour and a half. I don't know. No, we said we're going to shoot for about 30 minutes. But if you've got anything you want to add, we'll do that. And if not, we'll just sit and look at each other and know how cute our wives are or something. I don't know. For husbands specifically? I'll give you a couple. And the old caveat, I don't agree with everything in them. Hopefully you understand that. Written by people, you're not going to agree with everything. You may have heard of the book Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. I like the book, but here's one of the few times you hear me say this. Don't read the whole book. If you read about the first 60 pages, you've read the entire book. He says the same thing over and over and over, but he had to make it about 300 pages so it looked like and again, it's good stuff. But if you're kind of a guy, I don't like to read very much, seriously, read about the first 60 pages and you got it, okay? It's a great basic resource. There's a book, and I can't remember who wrote it, called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. I want to say Meg Meeker wrote that. I may be wrong, but I think that's correct. Outstanding book. So I can't remember who wrote it, but it's one of those that really helped me understand how much a daughter needs a dad who isn't just there, but who, to use an old word, is the pillar. She can go to him. Whatever happens, she can go to him. Strong fathers, strong daughters. If you have little girls, I'll give you a cheap little book to read. It's great. It's called Daddy Daughter Dates. You can seriously read the whole book in about an hour and 15 minutes. It's super short, really practical. If you have little girls of any age, but especially if you have little girls, great book. And I actually have a lesson, not doing this weekend, but I was asked to do it once, and I love doing it. I've done a whole lesson before on dating your daughter, which is a really weird title to put on something. People are going, what kind of creep is coming here? But if you have daughters, take each one on a date. Do what they want to do. Treat her like a princess. And for about the next 3 or 4 months, she'll listen to anything you say. Now, you have to keep doing it because they're girls and they run out quick. But that little book will give you some good ideas for that. Let me think. Well, I mentioned earlier, anything by Kevin Leman. Have a New Kid by Friday is a great book. And the reason it's by Friday, by the way, is each book has 5 chapters: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. That's the shtick of the thing. But if the book Have a New Kid by Friday is great. And he takes some views on discipline, for example, that you may or may not agree with, but it'll make you evaluate your discipline for sure. I mean, you will really look at some stuff a different way because he believes strongly in, yes, discipline the way the Bible describes it, but also, look, you got yourself into this mess, you're smart to get yourself out of it. And a lot of us are like, no, we'll fix it. And he's like, no, they were smart to get in this mess. Put the ball in their court. If they fail a little bit, that's what you're there for. But let them get out. I've got a shelf. I'm trying to think of the shelf. It goes this way. Of ones I've liked. I've read plenty that I couldn't stand. Let me look up the name. I haven't read this book in years. It's one I want to go back and read eventually. But let me look up the name real quick. That is fantastic for men. I think this is right. Yeah. There's a book written by a denominational guy. It's called Stepping Up. And the subtitle is A Call to Courageous Manhood. Outstanding. When I lived in Nashville for several years, I did a men's mentoring group. And my rules were I would not do any more than 8 men because Jesus only did 12 and I'm not Jesus. And everyone had to be younger than me. And at that time, I was only in my late 30s or so. So most of them were like 25 to 28 range, somewhere in there. And they had to read this book first every year, and every one of them would come to the meeting, and sometimes they would cry because of some of the stuff they read in there. Because what he does in that book is Dennis Rainey's the author. What he does in that book is walk through my responsibility as like a young husband, that sort of thing, all the way to his word. The last chapter is being the patriarch. What does it mean when I'm 70, 80 years old and I've got grandkids, great grandkids, and they're one of his real examples is one of his own kids had a daughter who wasn't supposed to live more than a few hours. How do I handle that as the guy in the family in the hospital room? It's called Stepping Up, A Call to Courageous Manhood. There's also, it's an older book, so some of the illustrations are a little bit old. It's called Point Man. Steve, I think you pronounce his last name Farrar, something like that. It's probably written 30 years ago. So some of the illustrations, and I'm sure the statistics are way out, but the principle is fantastic. It's called it's called Point Man by Steve Farrar. And he's written a couple other books. I don't think they're quite as good. Anything he writes, in my opinion, is worth reading, but that's by far the best book. And that one will take a while. It's kind of long. But he grabs you with a story in the beginning to where you're like, page turning time. Point Man, some of you have been in the military. Point Man's the guy out front, right, who's in charge of everything. So he takes that terminology of that's who you are for your family, but he opens it with a story, and you're going, yeah. So that's a good one. Is that enough? That get you through a couple weeks of reading? I read a lot. I need to read more. I need to have a list written down when somebody asks me that. I mean, anything, the classics. 5 Love Languages is worth a couple reading together. His Needs, Her Needs is worth reading together. And that book, by the way, that book that he lists from, I can't remember who wrote His Needs, Her Needs. Willard Harley, that's it, yeah. He lists from a study the needs in order, and the number one for men is something like sexual, whatever he calls it, I can't remember the word. That opened my wife's eyes. She's like, really, that's first? I'm like, yes, that's really true in a lot of cases, not every case. Connected with that, this is actually also by Kevin Lehman. He has a book called Sheet Music. Guess what it's about, okay? Again, I don't agree with everything he teaches in that book, but as a married couple, it is a great study to go through together because he takes a very biblical approach. It's not just, hey, make sure you're doing this, okay? But it's very well done biblically and psychologically. You're not going to agree with everything, and you're probably going to have some very weird conversations. We did. So I'm like, really? This is yeah, that's the case. I'll also mention, and I haven't looked this up in a while, so some of you who do podcasting and stuff, it may not even still be available. It's been years since I listened to it. But a number of years ago, a man named Tommy Nelson, not Thomas Nelson like the printing company, but Tommy, he's was at the time a denominational preacher from whatever town the University of North Texas is in. I'm forgetting the name of the town. Anyway, huge congregation. But he did a series of lessons to that congregation on the Song of Solomon. And they were so popular that they made them into their own podcast. I think it's all like five or six lessons. And Leah and I just listened to them together. When podcasting first became a thing, we're talking 15 years ago or more, we listened to these things. To this day, we still remember some of the things he said in those lessons because it's basically a textual study of Song of Solomon, but he makes it very practical. And since he's preaching at a congregation, it's also not like, make you blush stuff. He does a very good job of keeping it, genteel, but very practical and very good about that subject. So if you're more an audio person, that's a good thing. And again, I agree with everything he says, and this is a different subject, than just marriage. But if you've never read any of Dave Ramsey stuff or anything like that as a couple, do it for the financial side of stuff. Leah and I took Financial Peace University after we were out of debt, just to get. Now we're back in debt because we're stupid. But if you can read anything financially as a couple, it's better to read as a couple than one of you reading it's a great idea and say, we're going to start taking half our income and putting it in the bank, and your spouse is going, we need a washer. It's like, this is not wise. So anything, I would recommend anything by him as well. What else? Keep going down the shelves. Just thinking. Okay. What's the name of the series? Do you remember? It's called Song of Solomon. Okay, there you go. Yeah, and the guy's name is Tommy Nelson. Mm-hmm. Yep. But it's a like I said, that's been years ago. Yeah. Yeah. So there's just some to at least get you started. You can go through all those the next week or two, I'm sure, and then get started on some others. And then, by the way, since you mentioned resources, the lesson I mentioned tomorrow on family devotionals, we're going to share several for that specific thing in that lesson. So, yeah.